Awesome. Already at 20. That's great. People are starting to trickle in. I always feel like I need some kind of music in the background. Like this morning before we started the keynote, I felt like I should reshare with sound, put some like, morning jazz or something on, but usually I just fill the awkward silence with my voice instead. Wonderful.
Example, I was at a presentation a while back where I was filling some space as people came in, and someone came up to me afterwards. It was actually in person. Well, it was hybrid, but I think I told some story. I'm not sure what I was talking about. And the person came up to me and said, "You should start an ASMR channel." And I said, "Oh." And I wasn't sure how to take that because perhaps I had sent them off to sleep with the dulcet tones or what that actually meant. But I mean, I now have a side gig possibility.
There you go. Look at that. See, it's a good place to practice those skills, right? You never know when it might come in handy. Wonderful. So I think we'll get started so that we don't run out of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Good afternoon. I hope you had a wonderful lunch. My name is Dimple Rye. I use she and her pronouns. I work as the Associate Director for Advising and Career Services. And I'm excited to introduce our session for this afternoon, From Awareness to Action, Advancing Employment for Students with Disabilities, presented by Tara Connolly and Kathy Edwards from Carleton University. Quick agenda for our presentation. So we would like to mention our Transition to Work initiative and our committee between Humber and UGH that helps to host workshops and events for students, staff, and faculty at Humber and UGH. So I'll share a little bit about that. We'll do a land acknowledgement and present our speakers, and then our speakers will take over to talk about the wonderful resources that they have created. So for those of you who might be unfamiliar with Transition to Work, this is an initiative that we started back in 2018 through a number of departments that have partnered at Humber and UGH to create trainings and awareness opportunities for people with disabilities. So the initiatives that we run through Transition to Work promote self-advocacy, provide opportunities to develop career readiness and exploratory skills, offer career preparedness workshops and events. We offer tips for disclosing and negotiating accommodation needs in the workplace. We offer regular wraparound supports as part of learners' career readiness journeys and share examples of successful workplace accommodations and supportive employers. So if you have any further questions about what we do around Transition to Work at Humber and UGH, please feel free to reach out to members of our committee, and we'd be happy to share more. I do want to give a quick shout out to our committee. So Ria, Keisha, and Elaine from Advising and Career Services, Niall and Keith from Student Wellness and Equitable Learning, Crystal Leslie, who is a placement advisor from the Faculty of Social and Community Services, Melissa Patrici from UGH's Career Services, and we usually have representatives from Seneca College represented for our Transition to Work committee. So I'd like to give a quick shout out to all of them and thank all of them for their work on the committee that they do. So a bit of housekeeping for our session today. The session is being recorded and recordings will be available afterwards on the Advising and Careers website, on our Humber Advising Conference website. We ask that everyone keeps their microphone muted unless you're speaking. You can use the chat function for general comments or questions and Q&A as well. We will have a chance to pause throughout the session to take questions, so you're welcome to put them in the chat or the Q&A feature that our committee will help to navigate, and Tara and Kathy will pause throughout to see whether there are questions, but we'll also make some time at the end for Q&A. You're welcome to leave your cameras on if you would like to. Our presenters like to see that there are people in the room, so feel free to do that if you would like to. And if you'd like to turn on the auto captioning, the instructions are on the screen. If you click on the More function at the top, go down to Language and Speech and turn on live captions. So I'm going to turn it over to Ria from our committee to do our land acknowledgement.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Ria Liu. My pronoun is she and her. I'm one of the Korean student success advisors here at Humber. So I'm really greatly grateful for the opportunity to share this land acknowledgement and to reflect on the land we gathered on today. When I first arrived in Canada as an international student, I knew very little about the indigenous people of this land. And the few things I had heard were often shaped by stereotypes back then. And without realizing it, I accepted those limited narratives and moved forward without truly understanding the land or the indigenous people who have cared for this beautiful place for generations. Years later, now as an immigrant welcomed by this country, I've come to realize how much I owe to those who lived on this land long before me. I've come to understand that true belongings to the land we live on today means acknowledging and respecting the generations of people who have protected and cared for it with deep connections. Through Humber's key mindset of learning outcomes, indigenous way of being, knowing, and doing, I've been invited to reflect more deeply on inclusion, responsibility, and respect. The title, a powerful symbol for many indigenous people, reminded me of patience, wisdom, and our connection to future generations. It also represents Taro Island and the lived history beneath our feet. Now I'd like to share Humber's official land acknowledgement and invite us all to take a moment to recognize and reflect on the land we gathered on today. Humber is located within the traditional treaty lands of Mississauga of Credit, known as Etobicoke, the place of elders in Mississauga language. The region is uniquely situated along the Humber River watershed, which historically provided an integral connection for Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat people between the Ontario Lake Shore and Lake Simcoe, Georgian Bay regions. Now home to people of numerous nations, Etobicoke continues to provide a vital source of interconnection for all. Okay, thank you. So now, let me introduce our presenter, Tala Connolly. Sorry, Tala Connolly. Tala serves as Assistant Director of Research and Development at Accessibility Institute, Carleton University. In this role, she leads a variety of pan-Canadian projects focused on accessibility and the diverse lived experience of disabilities. With over 20 years of experience as a transition specialist, Taylor has consulted on the use of inclusive practice to enhance accessibility across multiple sectors, including school board, post-secondary institutions, businesses, government agencies, and healthcare settings. She is recognized as a content expert dedicated to building capacity in accessible practices and fostering accessibility confidence. In her counseling practice, Sala supports the diversity of individuals specializing in working with neurodivergent adults and youth. She collaborates with clients to develop personalized strategies that empower them to navigate transitions into throughout adulthood and enabling them to thrive on their own terms. Thank you. Please take over, Tala. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm not here by myself today. So I think you saw on the screen, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm here with my colleague who's pitch hitting in, but she is all that in my bio and more. So we don't have a bio for her today. This is Kathy Malcolm Edwards who's joining me today. And I think both of us were nodding quite a bit during your land acknowledgement, appreciating it quite a bit, how you shared. I myself have a heritage of my lineage as a settler, and my family have come over from various places in Europe, and that's how sort of we've come to this land. But where we get to work, play, live, and show gratitude for that here is it's the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. And for us at the Accessibility Institute, the land acknowledgement is super important, but it's not the only thing. It's really more a marker of us making sure that beyond words, we take actions. So that's super important to us as well, too. So thanks for sharing that very much before we start off today. Kathy, would you like to just take a wee minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Malcolm Edwards. My pronouns are she, her. I'm somebody who also identifies as having lived and living experience with disability, both visible and non-visible. I work at the Accessibility Institute, where I'm really privileged to be able to lead the accessibility strategy for Carleton University. And I'd like to do that by embracing my passion for all things design. So mostly in the area of social design, but it tends to be my guiding force in life. And it's really my privilege and honor to be here today and kind of pinch hit on this and help Tara out. I will be the one making the tech glitches as we go through this. So
far fewer than I ever would, Kath. So thank you. All right, so let's dive in then today. Really excited to be able to present to you today about one of the particular projects that we have been working on, but I'll start off with just mentioning a little bit to you, a little bit about the Accessibility Institute so that can contextualize it. Yeah, we'll skip. Oh, there's a little picture of my colleague who was going to be presenting with me, Julie Caldwell, also an amazing person who's here at the Institute and knows a lot about employment and accessibility. So that's someone to reach out to too, if you're ever thinking about these things.
I just want to check in because I'm flying a bit with not being able to see everything. Are the slides showing up okay for people?
Yep, we're on slide 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect.
Great. So at the Accessibility Institute, what are we into? One, we're into sort of demonstrating some thought leadership about moving the field of accessibility forward. How do we do that? Our projects. And I'm very lucky to be involved with a lot of those projects. So that's our sort of research piece that we dig into. But we are also about building that awareness and action-oriented stuff, the application of accessible practices across all sorts of sectors so that we can actually positively impact inclusivity and engagement and belonging. So the way we do that is we have something called the Professional Education for Accessibility Competence. So there these modules and training programs that we offer. We also do things that are tailored for folks as well too. So that's sort of our education and training piece that we do. Of course, engagement with community, excuse me, that infusion of community voice and facilitating connections between people who are already doing that great work. That comes out for us as we're the Secretariat for the Canadian Accessibility Network, hosted through here. And so that's a big piece as well for us. And last but certainly not least, we're really into sort of guiding and coordinating any of the accessibility related initiatives that are occurring here on our campus at Carleton from this community in order to amplify the impact of those efforts. And Kathy is our lead on that coordinated accessibility strategy. So those are sort of the main areas that as an Accessibility Institute we're involved in. Let me tell you about one of the projects. We're going to be giving you an output today of one of the projects we've been involved with. One of them was the David C. Onley Initiative. It was a multi-year research project in many different phases that was essentially looking at that gap in employment outcomes for post-secondary students living with disability and navigating barriers in the world. And so looking at, it happened here in the Ottawa area. but it was really more meant to be also supporting those outcomes elsewhere from what we produced. So here in the initial phase of that, it was led by Carleton University, and it was formal collaboration between Carleton as well as Algonquin College. La Cité Collégiale was also involved, and Université d'Ottawa. So we had both representation from university level, college, because we know that they both have a lot to learn from each other, and also from Francophone community as well. And if you want to learn more about that, there's a link here on this one. It's the onlyinitiative.ca. Right. I believe I'm supposed to mention as well, it was funded by the ministry. Et voilà, I've told you that now. Okay, so what did we know going into the David C. Onley Initiative project? Well, we knew we had already identified, there's lots of folks who've been doing great work around identifying particular gaps. So some of the things we knew going in was that post-secondary opportunities such as work integrated learning, co-ops, the different services we were providing, that those needed to become a little bit more accessible and even perhaps relevant and meaningful to students. This is what we were hearing from students themselves as well. Students with disabilities really felt that their experiences weren't necessarily being reflected back in what was being offered through those services. We knew that there needed to be better or improved collaboration between many different services at post-secondary, certainly, and in particular, we were focusing in on how were careers, co-ops, those services connecting with accessibility-related services as well. And then we also knew that there needed to be sort of a responsive service that goes beyond the minimum requirements that students' services had around being accessible, that really spoke to the student experience. So one of the things we did there was we looked at creating something called the Employment Pathways Facilitator. And knowing that services at post-secondary are often designed to either address disability-related or accessibility-related needs or employment-related needs on one hand or the other. The EPF was really conceptualized as a recognition that a person's lived experience of their disability-related pieces actually goes hand in hand with how they choose to navigate their employment journey goals. It's very individual in that sense. So it really was meant to provide students the opportunity to address their individual needs in developing skills, accessing just-in-time services and resources that were meaningful to them, and gaining work-related experiences. So as you know, there are lots of things like that out there in particular. We just heard about one, the transition to work, that was focusing a lot of those things as well too. So we were trying to harness some of that knowledge into a way that could actually really look at that, address a gap in service where we don't ask students to either go to employment and maybe not be able to speak about accessibility or disability related items as much, or they could go to folks who knew about accessibility but really didn't know so much about employment. So it was kind of hit and miss for students. So our next piece around addressing those issues is we knew we wanted to do that in an applied research kind of way. So what we did is we articulated a strategy for collective impact. And what I mean by that is in the first phase of this project, we knew that it's not just post-secondary who's going to be able to make the impact for students in their employment outcomes. It's not just employers. It's not just community service partners. It's not just governments. It actually has to be all of us together working collectively to push that forward, to address that transition and smooth it out. So we designed David C. Onley Initiative as a collective impact strategy. The second phase of it, purely because actually we were getting funding from the ministry that was focused on education, we did a zoom in on how we could best do that at post-secondary. But we really articulate this project as it needs to be everyone together. So we designed a model that was based on that. And we also wanted to address that intersection and remind people that that lived experience and the individual employment journey, we can't really separate those out. Thanks, Kath. So I want to go over just a few foundational assumptions before we show you one of the outputs from this project. What were our assumptions in this project? Well, one is that accessibility is everyone's to own and to champion. So it doesn't just live in one service or one group of folks who think this is important. In our mind, we will all have the experience of having an impact on the way we navigate the world at one point or another. Whether that's I fulfill my lifelong dream of being like a ref in roller derby this summer. Maybe I have a little mishap, and now I'm going to need some accessibility related things in my environment to support me with that. I'm not calling that in, by the way. I think it'll all be fine. But so we know, though, that we will all need things to be inclusively designed for us over our lifetime. And whether it's we've always needed it, we need it intermittently, we need it right now, or we're going to need it in future. It's about us. And we mention this just because often when people are talking about accessibility and disability, they often are kind of thinking about the other, somebody else. And actually, these conversations are about you, they're about me, they're about all of us. The other assumption that we have is that student voice and the perspective from lived experience is absolutely essential in all our efforts. And, we see that too, how things can quickly change, how things changed when COVID changed how we were going to have to do services. Life changes all the time. So it's not a matter of consult once and then move on. It actually needs to be a conversation with community to see if what we are developing is speaking to the community around us. We also have this is built on the assumption that you don't have to be an expert in disability to apply accessible practices. And sometimes we were hearing from either employers or service providers that fear potentially of doing something wrong or not knowing how to do certain things or not being an expert. And we just want to stress that you don't actually have to have that full expertise in order to be accessible in what you do. Certainly, there's lots of times where we want additional expertise in these areas to enrich what we're doing, but it shouldn't stop our work. Likewise, and this is a shout out to all my accessibility related folks, you don't have to be an expert in employment to be supportive of an employment journey, right? Well, you can be talking to someone about their strengths or their challenges that might be disability related for them or accessibility barriers that they are meeting up with, and still ask them, gee, I wonder what this would look like in an employment context. You don't have to be an employment and career specialist to ask little things and percolate that for students. The intersection of our employment journey and our journey with disability, as we've said already, is an extremely powerful one. So we've kept that central at our work. Another thing we assumed and found in our work was that collaboration isn't easy, but it is absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it. And a lot of our pilots in the David C. Onley Initiative project, if you get the chance to look through all of our different phases, a lot of pilots really did a lot about increased collaboration. L'Université d'Ottawa, George Brown, a lot of folks were doing things that increased, they speak to why the collaboration is important. If you want to read our report, you'd have some time on a dock somewhere in the summer, do it, because they really do talk about those things that I think you will find as practitioners and people who are on the ground. It's nice to hear from others who are like, yeah, actually, that really was worth my time and effort. And then the last thing is that tailored supports are there to enrich already accessible services. So for instance, when we defined the employment pathways facilitator to address a gap, that's in addition. That's not to replace somebody else's great work that they're doing in careers or somebody else's work elsewhere. It's actually as an additional piece that we think should be available to students with lived experience of disability, but not a place where they have to go, not a place where it's the only thing for them. So just really being careful to know that things we suggest are not as a proxy or a replacement from everything being accessible. Thanks, Kath. What were we trying to achieve in this project? Well, we wanted to push things so that they were beyond compliance, not just meeting AODA principles and legislations, but actually pushing past by hearing what our students were needing and also what our service providers were finding in the various institutions. Could we start to build practices that were going beyond compliance and doing more? Certainly there was an intentionality around collaboration because we knew that it's not something that's easy to just have happen. And so we really approached it with great intentionality. collective impact I've spoken to. We wanted to be making sure that we're supporting outcomes for students in a positive way. And again, specialization versus segregation in terms of all that we were offering. And then that baseline competency and understanding accessibility. We don't have to be an expert, but we did want everybody to start having a certain level of competency in this, because that gives us a smoother road for students who want to choose various services to support their journeys. If it's sort of hit and miss around what someone might know about accessibility, that becomes problematic for students in their journeys, and that's what we heard as well. Okay, thanks, Kath. All right, we're almost through this part, and then we just get to show you the tool, which is the major part of our presentation, and Kath's going to help us with that. Able2.ca is part of through the David C. Onley initiative, we created sort of an awareness campaign, and we created part of our website, which is to have tools, resources for both employers and post-secondary service providers who are working at that sort of that hiring of students all along the points in their journey, whether that's, summer work, or whether that's their post degree and they're trying to go for their career. We wanted to be able to support all the points in the transition. So there's lots of resources on able2.ca. Two of the major pieces are in the resources, some of those myth busting resources, videos from employers who've been doing things. So lots of little pieces that you can take and show to others and share with others who might be needing some of that information that you'd like to provide. So whether you perhaps support employers, maybe you can provide them or direct them to these resources as well. Able2.ca Learn is where you will find what we're about to show you, which is the field guide, we call it. And that one is very specific to post-secondary service providers. So although an employer could probably glean something from it, we have designed it with you at post-secondary in mind as the audience. Okay, great.
Ellie?
Now it's you.
Right.
You're on.
Okay.
So what Kath is going to help us with right now is we're going to actually give you a look at the field guide. I'm going to speak to it a little bit. Kath and I might talk a little bit about some of the benefits of this, and you are certainly welcome to ask questions as well. There's far more to do with the David C. Onley initiative. It was an extensive many-year project. So if you have a moment, I do encourage you to head to able2.ca or the David C. Onley initiative through our Accessibility Institute. So you can find it in a multitude of ways. All right, so what Kath has brought us to here is the initial piece when you get onto Able2 and you want to prepare students for work, or you are supporting students and you want to access the field guide.
And so you can see at the bottom of the page, there are several hyperlinks. We're going to go through some of these examples. And the first one we will start with is the field guide overview. And there are two ways to engage with the material. You can click on the start button, and that will bring you to a learning system. But you can also click directly on the links below. So just to be aware, there's two ways to engage with the material.
We wanted this, we built this with adult learners in mind, and also from our own experience. I also was in a post-secondary service. Many of us are here working at post-secondary. We know the pressures and we know how little time people often have. So we tried to design this in a way where you could go into it and find what you need. We know there's a whole lot of different learners. Some people want to be able to glean information that's going to help them make an argument to whether it's a manager or somebody else about why we might want to try a certain strategy. So they want that kind of content. Other people are like, just give me the template. I'll implement it right now and ask for forgiveness later. There's all sorts of different approaches to our work. So we tried to make sure there was a little bit for everyone in that. This first piece, we do suggest people go through it first just to kind of get that content. It's an introduction to the field guide itself, and just kind of telling you what it's about. Thanks, Kath, for also just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot to say a pause after we did the slide presentation and see if there were any questions in the chat based on the slide presentation. I don't think any have come up.
No, that's good.
I
do admit, I'm sorry, I kind of threw a fire hose, gave you all of that about the project because I want to make sure you get to see this piece. But any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out at a later time too if you want. So the field guide is structured in a particular way. There are limitations to the platform that we used. It's actually designed to usually be showing courses. So there might be some things that you find are finicky, but I think the more you get into this, you'll find the information you need by kind of exploring around. We did try, though, to give a structure to the field guide that you could anticipate when you go into each of the sort of 4 main areas that we have. So there's 4 practices, and within those practices, you will find sort of sections. So in each practice, you'll have an introduction, kind of saying, what is this practice about? What do we mean by this? You'll then have a section where we call it Awareness Plus, which is just really to, give some context to why does this matter and why are we even talking about this? So to provide that. Sometimes that's also helpful if you're trying to convince someone else. It gives you a little bit of the language. Then there will be a piece where there's just content that's related to the activities of our project and some of the pieces that came out of that. And then the 4th piece, we call it Making the Case, and you'll see that in each of the practices. That's really where you'll be able to sort of get the information about why this might be important if you're making the case to someone else, but you will also find at the end of each of the Making the Case sections some tools and resources that you can download and just go ahead and use. So I tell you that because there's a few different ways to get to tools and resources, and perhaps Kathy's going to show you this in a moment. You could go to tools and resources and go all the way through the content, and at the end, there will be the tools and resources. We'll show you that in a minute. And also you can head back to the start from there too, if you want. However, Kathy's showing you that she's just gone to a tab that she had kept open, which you could do as well, and head to this piece and go straight to a place where we have all of the tools and resources gathered together. So you can either go one pillar at a time, or you can kind of grab them all together. Go ahead, Kath.
I was just going to say, so why don't we do an example? We'll get into get students with disabilities and employers preparing for employment early. So it opens up a new tab. And as you can see, there's 2 ways to, as we were saying earlier, engage. You can click start, or you can see here that there's like an index, a table of contents that are broken down into those areas Tara had just reviewed: introduction, Awareness Plus, the content piece, and then building or making the case for change. So I'm going to click on the start.
Yeah, do you want to take us on a bit of a journey? Perfect.
Sure. So if we go to the start, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen as well, you now have the index, the table of contents. And we're going to maybe look at make the job search more inclusive. Let's see what it says in there. So I apologize, there will be some scrolling. I should have mentioned that in advance. So I'm just going to scroll down the screen a little bit. So you can see there's an introduction to this section, and then it outlines what 3 subsections will be covered off in this. So in this one, it's understanding what accommodation means, encouraging employers to improve job descriptions, and removing barriers that prevent students from connecting. We click continue, and it starts to bring us through those modules, if you will, to get us more familiar with the content and understanding what our role might be. Some more scrolling is going to happen because I want to get down to this. Now, Tara, do you want to walk us through this, or do you want me to keep going?
Sure, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that, and you
Sure.
can jump in as well. So this, again, in terms of interactivity, it depends on your level of, if you're someone who's already worked in this area for a long time, some of these things will feel somewhat obvious. If you're someone who hasn't, then you might want to be doing some more exploring. So again, this allows you to sort of jump through. I'm pointing, you can't see where I'm pointing to, but on the side, you can jump through to the different places. Kath has now jumped to this. So this one is talking about how, for instance, we will often find employers making we know sometimes our students will self-select out of a particular job position because it says you have to be the best communicator in the world. You probably should have X amount of experience. You have to be able to do 18 cartwheels. And we really would love it if you also could speak 5 languages. However, the core pieces to that, what is really essential to that job, isn't all of those things. Maybe you're not going to be communicating with folks a lot. Maybe you have to be great at communicating by email, but there's not going to be a lot of cooler talk. So we really are trying to encourage employers to really show what it could look like in the workplace and have these sort of more accessible job requirement lists, right? Now, here we gave some sort of silly examples, but it allows you to kind of explore what an example of that could look like, right? So things that you could be asking. So if you are supporting employers in these sort of things, you can ask them these questions as well. Likewise for students, right? Helping students to self-advocate in this case. If you're directly working with students, helping them to kind of look and see, even ask questions about what's negotiable in, or what is essential in a job versus what is a nice to have. So they can understand that. Do they feel confident asking for a chance to actually go around the place? Does it have to be an online interview? Those types of things where they can actually advocate for things that would be helpful for their own accessibility.
And then there's also tips, as Tara was saying, to look at how you might help employers make more accurate or more accurate, realistic job descriptions in the first place. I know from some of work that I've done, they're not necessarily always going to be a large-scale multinational company with its own human resource department that have skilled, trained people in this area. It might be someone in a small to medium enterprise who is the director of the business, but also doing the job descriptions, maybe doesn't have that skill or that training. And so providing them with coaching opportunity to help them in creating more accurate job descriptions would be really useful as well.
Yeah. And Kathy, you've reminded me of something then to actually mention to this group as well for anyone who's supporting employers. Exactly. If you're not a huge bank, you may not have a full staff of folks who are dealing with this. The colleges that were working with us in the first part of this project mentioned that it would be helpful for employers to have a resource, particularly those small employers who could have a sort of HR related type of resource. So in able2.ca, there's also another thing called Tap into the Talent. And that is specifically for employers. So you could send employers to that. And it's really just an overview of what is duty to accommodate, what are the different practices how do you support inclusive employment practices? And it's modules that they can go through on their own as smaller business folks.
And so this is just an example of one of the modules, one of the content pieces. As Tara was saying earlier, you can use the navigation and for instance, if the idea being that the practices are there to deepen understanding where needed, but we also recognize we've got some top talent here in the room, and you might be like, give me to the action part. I just want to get to the tools. You can be in a module, and as Tara was saying, you can scroll through. Again, I'm going to scroll right now, so if you need to shut your eyes. At the very bottom, I've stopped scrolling now. There is content to the tools and resource section and the return to the home page, if that's what you're looking for. And alternatively, you can, on the home page, again, you can jump right to the meat of this and go to prepare for work, tools and resources.
Shall we pick one to take a peek at?
Yeah, how about work for students? I think I heard it, I saw on the intro slide, there was one about, now I'm trying to remember what it was.
Well, while you look, because I think we talked about one yesterday too, Kath, that we could look at, but I do want to mention that the way we have our tools set up too is often we see the tools as being important for you as service providers, but some tools might be something that you would use individually as a service provider to integrate things into your own understanding and up your game in terms of information that you might need. But you also might want a tool that you can give to an employer or a tool that you can directly give to a student. So we've kind of separated them out in some ways too, so that there are things that you can use with others.
Perfect. And so there are tools, again, as we were saying, listed by each of those practices. And so if we went into, say, supports for, on the employment journey side, supports for service providers. We go into that one. How to discuss disclosure and accommodation. So if I go through and I click on that, it'll bring up a resource that was created by one of our partners, Algonquin College, and a presentation that they did around disclosure and accommodation. And this is something that can be modified, right, Tara?
Absolutely. So everyone has contributed from our pilots, things that they utilized, that they sort of tested in their own settings, and you can take them and modify them. You can take the content, take what works for you. If there's pieces that doesn't actually work in your context, that's fine. It's really, these are just sort of wanting to be able to provide people a bit of a template to get started with. You can take it and use as is if you want. Always nice to give credit and shout outs to people who have done the work, of course. I highly encourage that, but these are things that are all modifiable. We've included things even like when we talk about helping collaboration or increase collaboration, one of the activities we did was to host lunch and learns between different services so they could just get a sense of what each other was up to, what their pain points and pressure points were, what they were trying to achieve with students, where there were some overlaps. And sometimes that's not easy to get going. So we included emails that we sent out, so templates of the emails we sent out to invite people, some of the scheduling pieces. So we actually included in these suite of tools some very, sort of logistic-based type tools that you could just take, modify, and use so that you don't have to start from scratch. Because it's one thing to say, yeah, go and collaborate. But if you actually have some tools to support that, it might happen a little easier for you.
And as Tara's saying, in the one example we just showed, it brought up a PowerPoint presentation that's configurable to your needs. In others, you might find that they're zip files, so they're combined files that are together that you may need to, it will bring up the download screen and you can see the zip files that are within that. So there's different experiences you might have when you're trying to access the resources.
So maybe we'll pause for a second as well and just see if there's any questions about the field guide, about the project or what we were intending. We just open it up to you for now, or even just some feedback, right, on whether, because you are indeed, many of you are the audience for this type of a tool, to see what you're thinking about it. And how whether you see yourself being able to utilize it easily, not, kind of open to all of that feedback. What's not included in this field guide, but is in some of our reports, which are available on our website as well, are some of the very specific activities that our pilot sites got into, so we chose pilot sites who were wanting to build some of their readiness around accessibility and supporting the student journey. And they were all at very different places, and they had different contexts, because we know at post-secondary, there's all sorts of different cultures, whether you're a large institution, a small institution, are you in a northern community, are you urban setting? It's all going to matter what you're doing with this type of work to support your students. Not everybody can hire an employment pathways facilitator, right? Some people are 3 or 4 hats at a smaller setting. So with all of that in mind, our pilots did what was meaningful to them. And so you might find that interesting to look at as well, because there might be some ways that resonates with what your context is at Humber. I see there's a question there from Elaine.
Hi. Working with students now for a year, I am noticing, especially for students with disabilities, it is what I call the time factor. When I look at your site, it's very comprehensive. It's very detailed. And I am finding that students do not have a lot of time to really think about their careers or to start to develop skills needed for when they're in the workplace. So what has been your experience as far as the amount of time students in general have the time to engage with career services while they're in school?
Yeah, great point. Absolutely. And this we heard from service providers as well. So certainly, like, the content of the field guide is, just to clarify, I know this is not what you said, but this is not content necessarily for students. Of course, they could go on there, but this is directed to you folks. To your point, absolutely. Sometimes we're not seeing people come until the very end of their journey. And students have said sometimes why that is. They're sometimes just navigating what it takes to have lived experience of disability and be in a post-secondary environment at all, right? They are navigating appointments, they're navigating other pieces. So in that way, we found pushing sort of that awareness plus aspect for all of our colleagues to sort of say, this is why it's essential that we're thinking about accessibility, that these students need to see themselves reflected in more than one service. And they need to see that this employment journey and pathway looks different for everyone, but that they're getting touch points all along the way. So for instance, even if we're suggesting, maybe for a student that for them, volunteerism might be something they want to add in to continue getting some experience, and they head to our volunteer hub, and none of the things that are available are actually accessible. So seeing glitches in our own processes and our own collaboration is one step towards kind of a greater reflection out to students about this journey. That's my first kind of very high level abstract answer to that. Absolutely. The time thing is really hard. I agree with you. And so in my mind, this is just me saying this, I think little bites, little bits and pieces whenever we can. So if you're in to see me for academic accommodations, I just put a little thing in your mind saying, gee, I wonder what you might ask for within an employment setting related to this. Or maybe this one has nothing to do with a potential employment setting. And then I back off, because I know the student is like in exams and not ready to talk about that yet. Or we talked also about scaffolded types of referrals. So it's not just a, hey, here's the card to career services. It's actually a much more sort of scaffolded, that's an educational based term, I guess, but like a supported, let's call together. How about you give a call over to Careers Now? I know that so-and-so has a lot of information about equestrian jobs and how accessible they are, or whatever it is. Like, because we found that a lot of our informal connections as service providers, while helpful, we weren't always utilizing them, right? And that's why the collaboration piece is so important between services, is really helping us understand who's got info, who's trying to achieve what, so we can do some good scaffolded referrals. The last thing I'll say is you might be interested in what we were talking about in terms of the employment pathways facilitator. It's far more prescribed. It's a lot of work, just like transition to work that you were just hearing about probably was a lot of work to set up as well too, but so worth it in terms of that tailored piece where it really meets students where they're at. So if as a student, I can't talk about the employment journey in terms of what's my career step going to be next, but I can talk about how I'm struggling with a particular skill set that's going to help for that. That's where I'm met at. And we move to what's the skill set we're going to work on. And that was one of the powerful things we heard. We measured the employment pathways facilitator quite a lot. And in the feedback was because it was solution focused, it was just in time to what the student was needing, and it moved them along their pathways towards employment in ways that were meaningful to them and respected what their particular journey was, while still pushing like goal-oriented stuff, right? And it was very much a empowerment model, not to do for the student, but to facilitate and support the student to do for themselves as well too, in a way that kind of respected the fact that, yeah, it's hard to go navigate the systems and services in a post-secondary institution when you're already navigating maybe the medical health field to deal with your own stuff. Or maybe as someone who's neurodivergent, you are basically masking the entire day, and anything extra is going to be a little bit tough. So, you know, it's really kind of meeting a student where they're at. I realized that was a little vague, and I didn't give you the answer on time because time is really hard. Yes.
Tara, I just wanted to check in and see if we have time for one more question. I know that I believe Dimple had another resource that she wanted to share. So I don't know if we have time for Niall, or if you want to maybe get direction from Dimple.
Yeah, we still have about 10 minutes left, so happy to continue to take some questions before we share those resources.
Yeah,
perfect.
We're also happy to come back sometime and just have like, let's sit and chat and consult and talk about all the stuff that's going on for us as service providers, because
yes, and lunch and learns. I would love that.
Right? Absolutely. Like you got a good resource in Kath here as well too, and a few of my other colleagues here. We could all just kind of join and start anyway, go ahead, Niall. Sorry.
Hi, no problem. Yeah, a comment and a question. So I have an accessibility background and an employment services background. So I'm actually super stoked. I know, super stoked to look through this whole thing. And now that it's kind of like a quieter time of year for us, I have some time to go through it because it looks amazing. It looks really amazing. Now the question is,
don't say it's a quieter time. I'm knocking on wood and like crossing all my fingers for you. Like, don't say that. That's like saying a child is sleeping well at nights. Okay, go ahead.
I know my colleagues say that to me all the time, but I like to tempt superstition. So, now my question is, so with all those different pieces, like, are certain pieces like easily downloadable? Like, if I want to give one little piece to a student, it's pretty easy to download and stuff to do that? Okay.
I would say any of the tools certainly are, and we've done them most of them are in formats that you can easily modify. They're not in like don't touch me PDFs and such, and also just for accessibility reasons, trying to have those very useful for screen readers. And, you know, you could be old school like me and just basically copy the content out. And, you know, if you like the way a couple of paragraphs are worded, have at it for sure. It's meant to support your work with students for sure. Yeah. I don't know, was there a tech question to that too, though, that I didn't answer in terms of format or?
No, not really. I mean, I know some, well, you know, so what you're saying makes sense because I've often like cut and paste or whatever, but sometimes there's documents that are specifically designed to be downloaded to make it easier for people to get access to. So I wasn't sure how the site is sort of designed in that, keeping that in mind.
The tools and resources were meant to do that. Now, confines or I don't know confines, but you know, within the realm of keeping them as accessible documents as well too. But yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll be interesting to see what some of because we didn't develop all of them just through the Accessibility Institute. Like some of them are, as you saw, there's something from Algonquin. There's some things where La Cité informed it. U of O had some. So there's all of them kind of coming together. Certainly, there's some strong products here at Carleton as well too. We've had Act to Employ for many years as well. Shout out to them. So I think all of our different settings have some really cool stuff they're doing. And what I love about looking at these tools is you can also do just a little like comparison and be like, oh, we've got most of this, but this we didn't do. Let's take that piece out. So I do love that you're interested in sort of picking the fruit that look right to you, because that is what we're encouraging. This is not a fully prescriptive, you must do it all the same. The one place where I would caution around that is we're trying to articulate the employment pathways facilitator in a particular way. Because we did kind of study that one, and we actually did a feasibility test with other colleges and universities to say how easy would this be to implement, because it does have a particular, like, it's solution focused. There's sort of a philosophy behind that one that if you just take little pieces of it, it changes up what it is. However, having said that, some of our pilots said, I'm going to do the employment pathways facilitator, and then made it quite different than what it was. So I can be all finicky on like, oh, but that's not quite the employment pathways facilitator. It's like, well, it is to us. So I think, again, that speaks to how it has to work for your context, because you know your students and you know the community you're drawing on, and you know what's going to fly in your own institution as well too, right? Some people have an institution where they can like, okay, we're going full on with an initiative here. Others are like, I'm going to infuse this in so many different places that you're not going to notice it until it just lives here. So it really, we trust you for that. Any other questions from folks? I realize too, again, I encourage you, from the standpoint you're coming from and the sphere of influence you have, take the information from this and use it as makes sense to you, right? So some of it might have been written in a way where someone in an accessibility service might better utilize it. You can morph that and think about the consideration around, oh, what might I say to an employer about that? Or, yeah, so I would say this is something to keep, we encourage you to keep coming back to over and over, so that you can just percolate how you might use some of the information. It's not sort of you have to absorb it all immediately and implement. I would actually encourage you to keep coming back to it in little bits.
Nadia, I see you're unmuted. I wondered if you had a question.
Oh, it looks like it's gonna rain.
No. Was that a question? I don't think it's going to rain here.
Oh, I don't think she realizes. Yeah.
No, maybe not. Okay, no problem. That's all right. Okay, I don't know if there are any other questions. Keith, see anything else? No.
No, I don't see any questions. I think the majority of us are sort of on the website right now because it's very comprehensive.
Little doubles.
So
okay, yeah,
we're scrolling through it at the moment. It looks like there's lots that we can take away from it. So looking forward to going through it today.
Great. Absolutely. Yeah, and we know that, I think what a nice thing about this is every resource out there has its pluses and its minuses, easy to use, difficult to use, applicable, not applicable. What we really encourage you, this was made out of sort of love from post-secondary to post-secondary, in the sense that we understand there's lots going on. There's lots going on for students. There's lots going on for service providers and faculty. Like when we talk about accessibility, let's not forget faculty and staff and their navigation of systems. And it's not all about student, right? Too, it's about us as a campus community. And so we kind of are offering this out as a sort of a bit of a acknowledgement that you're doing awesome work out there. There's more we can do. There's more collaboration we can do. There's more accessibility boundaries that we can push, and that we encourage you to do so. And hopefully this will help with that. That's essentially how we offer this to you. And we look forward to any feedback you might have on it as well too, because I think there's more for us all to learn from each other. And it'd be interesting to see what, a David C. Only 3.0 could bring, or what we might explore. Thanks for taking the time with us today.
I guess I'll just quickly go through this, Dimple. Yeah, just very briefly. So I'm assuming we have students on this call as well. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about some of Humber Polytechnic's resources that we have, and then my other colleagues are going to talk a bit about Guelph Humber. So, we have some service. We have accessibility learning services. That's where I work, actually. And that's dealing with a lot of academic accommodations for students with disabilities. We also have our career and student success advisors. We have offices in most of our locations. There's one at Lakeshore on the first floor of the Student Welcome and Resource Center. North Campus has their career center and advising on the first floor of the LRC building. And I'll let my colleague at UGH say where her one is. We have career support peers, so students can book one-to-one appointments with other students, so peers, to talk about just general discussions about looking for work and resumes, and maybe talk about internship stuff that comes up a lot these days, and practicums. Career Connect is our employment website. So it has like job postings, full-time, part-time, also postings for people that are, I forget the term, students that are receiving OSAP who also might be looking for extra work as well. Devant, I think it's pronounced Devant or Devant. I only had a chance to look at it briefly. It's an online career tool, quite different than what we've been talking about today. There are some workshops I looked at, and there's an AI interview tool if you want to practice your interview skills, and some step-by-step in putting your resumes together. There doesn't appear to be an app for that, as far as I could tell. It seems to be a website, which is fine. We also have some online workshops and different things that come up. This is an example today, Transition to Work, one of our events talking about this. Lots of website resources that students can access. And there's also areas for career advancement services and Humber Community Employment Services for people who are getting ready to graduate from Humber. And you can see the link to career services at the bottom of the screen. And then this QR code will take you to the career services website as well. And I'll let my colleague, Melissa, talk about UGH, if she's still there.
I'm here. Thanks so much.
Good.
So at University of Guelph Humber, we are located in student services. So we work really closely with our colleagues in academic advising, as well as student life and alumni services. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop, or definitely a student-centered hub. And the value that we also get to tap into Humber is we get to tap into the resources at Humber, like accessibility learning services. So what we don't do, we definitely have reach when it comes to Humber to provide students with resources there. So for our department specifically, at University of Guelph Humber, our career support services are for alumni for life. So we are here for students from day one that they become a student, all the way out to 10 plus years in their career. So, and we have had students come back and tap into our resources when they're looking for to return to school for grad school, or maybe explore a new career. So we are always here for them. And so here on the screen are a few of the things that we do and specialize in: career planning and job search strategies, resume and cover letter support, interview preparation and practice, post-grad resources and tips, and networking events and workshops. So we're here for students and alumni always, and very privileged and happy to collaborate on initiatives like this, like Transition to Work, with our counterparts over, as we like to say, the other side of the bridge over at Humber.
And yeah, I guess I'll just close that as you asked, Dimple. So yeah, thanks very much, especially to Tara Connolly and Kathy Malcolm Edwards from Carleton to come down to talk to, or come online to talk to us about able.to. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to looking through this whole site. This looks like there's a lot of amazing stuff. And thanks to our TTW team, Transition to Work team, including myself, who helped put this together for today.
Thanks a lot for having us today. We really enjoyed it, and great to hear about things that go onwards, alumni afterwards. That was one of the gap areas, so glad to hear that's happening. Colleges and universities, we just kind of rock.
Yeah, we're the best.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Bye, Kathy. Bye, Tara. Thank you again.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Much.